Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the Riverwood Conservancy's webinar, Cooper's Hawk with Dave Taylor. My name is Stephanie. I am the Community Program Coordinator at the Riverwood Conservancy. I hope you are all doing well and staying safe. I want to say a special thanks to Credit Valley Conservation for making this webinar and other programs at the Riverwood Conservancy possible. And before we get to today's presentation, we have a couple housekeeping notes as well. Tomorrow, we have the final webinar of our climate series, Climate Victory Gardens, where you will learn all about climate-friendly gardening, rain gardens, pollinator gardens, food gardens, and how to start your own. Please register at the riverwoodconservancy.org/events. Thanks to Climate Impact for making this webinar and all other climate series webinars possible this past year. And as well, we have a final reminder to purchase your own Black Bears book, written and photographed by Dave Taylor himself. From bear behaviors, tracking, research, history and evolution, bear tourism, where to find them, how to photograph them, and stories about the populations across North America. You can purchase a personalized autographed copy of Black Bears until April 30th, which is this Friday. Please contact Brian at 905-279-5878 or email info@theriverwoodconservancy.org if you would like to make a purchase. All of the profits from these sales of these autographed books will go towards supporting the Riverwood Conservancy's education program. So thank you, Dave, and everyone for your support. Once these restrictions are lifted, which is right now May 20th, but this is a tentative date, the books may be picked up at Riverwood's office. There are no shipping options at this time, so we appreciate your patience and understanding during these times. If you need the book urgently or you cannot pick it up at Riverwood and you need it shipped to you, you can also purchase this book elsewhere. Check your local booksellers or reputable bookstores near you. And today we have our great Dave Taylor, who is a wildlife photographer and the author of more than 40 books on wildlife and ecology. He has produced educational videos and material about wildlife for school curriculum. He's taught science and geography for more than 30 years and nature photography and writing for more than 25 years. Dave is also the education program consultant at the Riverwood Conservancy. So welcome, Dave. And if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the Q&A tab, and all other comments can go in the chat bar. If you're watching from Facebook and you have questions as well, please comment down below and I will bring them back to the group. I will be posting some resource links in the chat in a few moments. And if you are watching with your class today, please comment down below how many students are in your class. That would be greatly appreciated. Okay, Dave, I will hand it over to you. I will stop sharing and you can go ahead.
All right, thank you very much, Stephanie. Welcome, everybody. And I appreciate the support for the book, by the way. I just think I saw a question come up about the book. If you're having trouble ordering it, please keep trying. I spoke with Brian Packham, who is picking up the orders earlier today. He said that he is going through them. We have a number that are already ordered. But he does not answer the phone necessarily directly because he's working at home, and he will get back to you. And if you're still having issues, you can contact me through my website, www.davetaylorwildlife.com, and the contact section, and I'll pass that information on to Brian. So thank you again for your support. Well, today we're not talking about bears. We're talking about birds, and for the next month or so, I will be producing videos on birds for my Facebook channel and also my YouTube channel, and we'll be doing some more talks on birds as they come up. But we're going to start with the Cooper's hawk. And the Cooper's hawk is a good one to start with because, well, let's introduce you to the Cooper's hawk. So I'm going to share the screen. I hope I do everything right this time. You should be seeing a full-size picture of Cooper's hawk master predator. Is that correct, Stephanie?
Yep, you're good to go.
All right, we're going to push the magic button. So the Cooper's hawk is a bird of prey. It's an accipiter, which means it's not a buteo. Buteos are the broad-winged hawks, like the red-tailed hawk that you see soaring over. This is a hawk that is more likely associated with woodlands, but not apparently forests. It likes to live in open wooded areas. It nests rather high up in the tree. This was a nest that we had at Riverwood that I was able to photograph a few years ago. The young will often sit on the ground. Don't worry about that if you see that. This is called proning. And proning is when the bird just lies out flat. Sometimes you'll see birds do it, and we call that anting, especially, well, when they're in an ant, with ants crawling all over them. And they think that that has something to do with cleaning off their feathers. I'm not sure why Cooper's hawks prone. I've done a little bit of research on it, and I haven't really found a really clear answer. The juveniles do not have as bright an eye as the parents. They are very adept at flying in the woods, however. Even these are youngsters, so they've been fledged for about a week and a half when this video was shot. And you can see they're quite at home in the trees. But they do a lot of their hunting in open areas. And their main prey is birds. They like songbirds in particular. Now they're about crow size, and this one was being mobbed by crows. Crows don't like birds of prey because the birds of prey feed on crows. So these crows chase the Cooper's hawk away, but the Cooper's hawk got its revenge. It came back in, and it could easily have taken one of those crows had it caught it. They are a common bird throughout Mississauga, throughout southern Ontario. If you have a forested area near your house, you probably have a Cooper's hawk using it. They are one of the most commonly seen birds, often mistaken, I think, for red-tailed hawks. But when you look at them, they have the long tail of the accipiter and narrower wings, which allows them to be more mobile. They are, as I said, predators of birds. Their favorite prey is probably pigeons, but they'll eat just about any songbird, and they will take larger birds as well. So I'm going to pause this one. Actually, I'm going to end this one. So now, stop sharing. That's what I want to do. Oh, we're going to get another video here. I apologize for this. And back to me. I'm not sure how to get out of this, Stephanie.
So Dave, if you press escape on your keyboard.
Try that. Yeah, there we go. We're out of it, thank goodness. Oh, the magic of technology. So Cooper's hawks are rather common. Now, one of the questions you should ask is why they're so common. A lot of people don't realize that the Cooper's hawk went the same route as the peregrine falcon and the bald eagle. Their numbers were greatly reduced because of DDT back in the 50s and 60s. Now, DDT was a chemical. It was sprayed to control insects, particularly mosquitoes. And it had the side effect of weakening eggshells. So when a bird laid an egg, it often would find that the egg cracked or would crack when the bird sat on it. It wasn't such a problem for smaller birds, but the further up the food chain you went, the worse the problem got. So by eating a robin.
Sorry to interrupt you again. You're still sharing your screen. I don't know if you're going to show another video.
I am going to show a video.
Oh, sorry.
But I'm not going to show one on turtles.
We just see turtles right now.
Okay. I'll go back to
Sorry about that.
No problem. Yeah, where's the stop share button? No, it's up here. I'll just swing back to here for a sec. I've got two screens and stuff is all over the screens here.
No problem.
So what happened was when a Cooper's hawk eats a robin, it takes some of the chemicals that are stored in the robin's body and ingests them. And the DDT chemical, the property in DDT, would stay in the Cooper's hawk's body. And the more it ate, the more this chemical would build up. Since robins weren't eating prey that consumed DDT, they did not have the same problem. Well, long story short, what happened is this built up in the birds of prey, their eggs started to soften and we lost them. Now, there are other reasons for losing them too. Mississauga, where I live, and probably if you live in an urban setting where you live too, was largely farmers' fields. Farmers' fields are not known for having a lot well, high density of trees. So as the farmers came in and they cleared the land, they were clearing the habitat. Now, this is a bird that likes edges. It likes open forests and it likes edges. A farmer's field, a pasture, is not conducive to this type of bird. And it's not conducive to a lot of songbirds. There are certainly songbirds that like farmer's field, but robins, for instance, they like wooded areas to nest in. So what happened was habitat loss, DDT, Cooper's hawk became very rare. Fast forward to the 90s, we're becoming more environmentally aware. Ecology is becoming a word that we're all aware of, ecosystems. We're starting to talk about climate change. And people have more time on their hands. So people are looking for things to do. Well, birding happened to be one of the most popular things to do. And bird feeding became, well, more popular than golf. So people started to feed songbirds. At the same time, cities were starting to expand into farmland and they were planting trees. So where I live in Mississauga was once a farmer's field. There are now more trees in my area than there would have been 50 years ago. So as we're planting trees and feeding birds, we are starting to recreate a habitat for the Cooper's hawk. And the Cooper's hawk started to, recolonize these places, started coming back in. And as it did so, we started to see more and more of it. And it was eating our songbirds, and it was living in our trees. And in Mississauga, which is a fairly urban city with lots of trees, I don't think there's a place you could go where you wouldn't see or wouldn't have a chance of seeing a Cooper's hawk. So they're all around us. They tend to nest earlier in the spring. So they nest about now, just when the leaves start to come out. They may have, I don't know if I read this or if it's just from my own personal observations and people I've talked to, they may have several nests that they try out, which really isn't that unusual. Lots of bird species will build multiple nests, the males trying to or to impress the female, and then the female chooses the one that suits them best. So Cooper's hawks are going through that process. Probably a month or so ago, they're starting to nest. The young will fully fledge by the summer, at least up here. Further south, they have already probably fledged. They are very climate driven, so the warmer the temperatures, the sooner they do all of these things. And then they migrate. They're a fairly migratory hawk. If there's lots of bird feeding going on, they may stay in an area. But as the songbirds move south, so do they. Now, they apparently do favor pigeons for some reason. And pigeons are slow moving, and in cities they're quite common. But Cooper's hawk in the country wouldn't have the pigeons to dine on. They occasionally eat mammals. And the next video I'm going to show you was absolutely remarkable to see, because these Cooper hawks were trying to take a prey that was probably maybe a little on the big side. So I've got to go back and play with technology here, which means if there's an opportunity to do something wrong, I will do it. Fortunately, I've got Stephanie here to help me out. We'll go with this. We'll go with this. That should enlarge it. And we'll push the magic button and hopefully this will play. So these are the same Cooper hawks that
David,
you saw on the left.
You need to share your screen.
I need to share my screen. That's
too many
things for an old guy to remember. There we are.
All good. Perfect.
These are the same Cooper's hawks that you saw in the previous video. Watch the way they hunt. Stalking along the ground. They're supposed to fly through the air, but their prey is a gray squirrel or a black squirrel, same species. They're also chasing a red squirrel, which is a little bit more their size. I think the squirrels viewed this as kind of a fun exercise. The hawks just weren't really good. Now, I'm sure if they actually got their claws into the squirrel, it would hurt. Sizing up the squirrel. You would think that coming down at it from a tree would be better. No squirrels were harmed in the making of this video, by the way. Some of the Cooper's hawks came off looking fairly dumb. Note the light eyes. That's a sure sign that it's a juvenile. But this would be good practice for when they start to hunt their real prey, which is birds. They certainly do take squirrels. They certainly will take mice and other animals, probably the occasional toad or frog. I don't even think the squirrels are really putting much of an effort into getting away. And they certainly seem to come back and taunt the Cooper's hawks. Was certainly well camouflaged. There's a standoff. I filmed this over a period of several days. There was lots of proning going on as well, where the Cooper's hawks would just sit in the tree, and they were still being fed by their parents, although less so than they would have been a while ago. And everybody emerges unscathed, but practice was gained. Now, see if we can do all of this. Stop the share. There we go. And I hope I'm back on screen. Well, meanwhile, I've got another video started. So that's the Cooper's hawk. They are fairly common hawk, as I was saying. You're going to see them around. A lot of birders, bird feeders get upset because they're taking the occasional cardinal or the occasional blue jay or whatever. I would suggest that you take a more ecological approach to this and just realize that this is nature's way. This is part of the natural cycle. A lot of the young birds that are going to be hatched in your backyard, whether they be robins, are going to die of natural causes, regardless of what you do to help them. And it's probably a good thing. That robin that is nesting in your yard right now, with this weather we're kind of predicting, it's likely to have 3 separate nestings that could produce over 12 babies. That could lead to a huge population of robins if they all survive. In fact, probably 1 or 2 will survive, maybe 3, enough to replace their parents in the grand scheme of things. And the Cooper's hawk youngsters, they're also vulnerable. Foxes may get them. Cats, dogs, cars may hit them. They may choose to migrate at the wrong time and find the climate, the weather causes them to expire. So don't lament the loss of the occasional bird. Enjoy the bird feeding for what it is. It's part of a natural system, well, a semi-natural system. You're feeding the birds are feeding other birds, and life goes on. So I wonder if there's any questions, because there's a lot we can explore, but let's see if we have any questions on these things from students or birders or photographers or whatever.
For sure. We're getting lots of questions in, actually. Let me just...
I do apologize for my awkwardness with the technology.
Oh, no. I think we all understand right now. Technology can be very frustrating, and there's a lot of buttons to press when you're doing a webinar too. The first question that came right off the bat was, what does fledge mean, Dave?
All right, so when a bird hatches, there are 2 types of 2 ways birds have or babies. Some are precocial and they hatch and they're right out of the nest. Geese are that type. So you see little goslings go off and off they fly or follow their parents. And then there are the birds of prey, which by and large are not precocial. And Stephanie, what's the word I'm looking for? Satirical. Uh, they hatch in the nest and they stay in the nest, and the parents bring food in, and they grow in the nest. So they're not able to feed themselves like a duckling. Think of a little robin that's really quite ugly, big covered eyes, can't see, naked, really reliant on their parents. Well, parents come in and feed them. So as those birds grow, the ones that stay in the nest, whether it be an owlet or a hawk or a robin, as they grow, they start to put their feathers on, and pretty soon they have their flight feathers, but they're not able to fly. So I'm doing some work with bald eagles right now. One nest is just about to fledge, the other's a long way short of it. So what you see is the eagles standing on the nest and they're flapping their wings, but they're holding on to the nest with their talons. So they're kind of lifting, but they don't want to let go. Eventually, they will let go, and that's when they're fledged. When they're able to fly off the nest, go to a tree. Doesn't mean the parents will stop feeding them, but they have a bigger problem because once all the babies fledge, and a Cooper's hawk can have up to 4 or 5 babies, although it's rare for them all to fledge, she has to now, mom and dad have to now go around to these 5 different locations. So feeding becomes a little rarer, and it's the babies are learning to rely more on their own abilities to catch food, even if they can't get a squirrel. So that's fledging. And it's a great time because the birds are often quite visible. You'll see young robins on the ground begging mom and dad for food. And what's going on then, just to do an aside on the robins, the robin that is feeding the baby on the ground, it's just dad, because mom is already on the next set of eggs. They're that quick. So poor dad is feeding babies for a long time. At least mom gets to sit and relax for a moment or two, although I don't expect her job is very easy, especially on a cold day like we had last week. So that's fledging. That's what's going on. And again, there's 2 types: the ones that just walk away from the nest like your ducklings, and the ones that have to stay in the nest. And interestingly enough, we think dinosaurs did the same thing, but then birds are dinosaurs. A little mantra.
So cool. Thanks, Dave. We actually have 4 of the same questions, 2 coming from Tony and Susan on Facebook, and also Linda and Christine on Zoom. All of them want to know, what are your top tips from differentiating Cooper's hawk from Sharpshin hawks?
You want to talk to a real birder. My top pick is the size difference. And that video that I showed you, a Cooper's hawk is roughly the size of a crow. And that video where the Cooper's hawk wheels around and goes after the crows, I think it's anybody's guess whether that's actually a Cooper's hawk or a Sharpshin. My basic way of identifying them is size and then location. I think of Sharpshin hawks as flying over the overhead, not through the forest. And I think of Cooper's hawks as being more weaving around them. But in actual fact, I think both species are quite adept at maneuvering when they have to through the forest. And certainly Cooper's hawks are quite capable of flying. I think if you want to get more technical, you get a good bird book and look it up. And it's going to come down to the bars on the tails, tail feathers, and other markings when you don't have something to measure them. Looking at the one in the video, those crows seem just a little bit bigger than that Cooper's hawk, but then the Cooper's hawk was pretty close. So I'm going to stick with Cooper's on it, but a real birder might be able to look and say, that's not a Cooper's. And if I'm wrong, I have learned a lesson. But you'll have to watch the video a number of times, so please do.
And I'm just reading a comment in the chat, and I believe this is correct way as well, is the shape of the tail is slightly different.
Mhm.
Byron has commented and said it's circular round tail on Cooper's and a sharp edge tail kind of cut off on the Sharpie as well, which I've heard of before. So
Yeah, I'm sure that's right. I just find that my old eyes are not quick enough to pick up that difference when I see it flying through the forest or overhead.
true. Very true.
Um,
Hawks are difficult.
yeah, it's like with bears. I'm often asked, how do you sex bears? Very carefully, it's the first answer. And the second one is by the length of their guard hairs, which are around their personal areas. Males have longer hairs there. But by God, if you're close enough to a bear to see that part of his anatomy,
You don't want to be.
you probably are concerned with other things besides whether it's male or female. So
Thanks, Dave.
I appreciate the advice on identifying Cooper's hawk.
Yeah, thanks, Byron. That's awesome. Actually, a question from him as well. There's a growing movement behind changing the name of many bird species, including the recently changed McGowan's, I think I'm saying that correctly, to thick-billed longspur, away from being named after European-descended naturalists, but instead more descriptive names or names of characteristics of habitat or ecology. What are your thoughts on renaming the Cooper's hawk? It's a really good question.
I've never really even thought about that. I think if you're going to rename a species, there should be some rationale behind it. And what I am more interested in is the DNA, which is showing us that some birds that we thought were one species are in fact 2 or 3 species. And I think that's a good basis for it. I think if it's got a cultural issue around it, for instance, the long-tailed duck, which used to be called the old squaw duck, and people took offense at that terminology, I can see that. For old-time birders, some of the old terms are fairly familiar, that they have been renaming birds for a long time. And I think that will continue, but I would prefer it be driven by DNA analysis and where cultural biases are, like, I don't know who Cooper was that named the Cooper's hawk, but that Cooper's hawk was once called a pigeon hawk or the greater pigeon hawk or the chicken hawk. I mean, it's had a lot of names, and it will continue to have new names, and we will probably find that we have more than one species of Cooper hawk when they start to do analysis and comparing ones from the west to the east. I don't have any objection to the name changes, but they should be logical and have a solid reason.
Awesome. That was a really good question.
Yeah, I'm not sure the answer is really good.
They are. They're wonderful, Dave.
I'm making them up as I go along. Is there something that makes you think I have a plan?
Judy wonders, is there any worry about a Cooper's hawk going after smaller pets while outdoors?
I don't think there is. There's very little concern that even a large bird, like a bird of prey like an eagle, would take a pet. I think Cooper's hawks, a pigeon is a good size for a Cooper's hawk. If your pet is smaller than a pigeon, like if you're walking your hamster, you may have some concerns, but I don't think for a dog or a cat there's any real concern, unless the animal happens to be too close to one of the fledglings that's on the ground. The parent might come in and attack it. But in all honesty, it's more likely a red-winged blackbird would do that, and it would be just to drive it off. And if I were worried about anything in the outdoors in the way of birds, I worry about Canada geese, because in Hamilton, I believe, Canada geese, 30, 40 years ago, actually killed a couple of people because they would fly at them at 40 miles an hour. The male defends the nest, and people got too close to the nest, and the male came winging in, and he's going at 40, 60 kilometers an hour. If the wingtip hit the person in the head, which is what in fact happened, it meant, well, in this case, or a couple of cases, it killed the person. And I think the same thing could be a danger to pets if they got too close to a nest, but I wouldn't If I had a Cooper's hawk nesting in my backyard, my cat was out back, I wouldn't worry about it. Great horned owl, I'd worry about, but not a Cooper's hawk.
I was just going to say, maybe not a Cooper's hawk, but there are other things to definitely worry
Yeah.
about. Your little
Yeah.
creatures, and a good reason why we should keep our dogs on leash when we're at Riverwood.
Good point.
Larry has asked, when a Cooper's comes into my backyard to kill a starling, it keeps its wing open until the starling dies. Then the wings close. Why does it do this?
Lots of hawks do it. They cover up like this. That's very standard. I've seen them do it in Africa. I've seen the Cooper's hawk do it in my own backyard. It's a way of protecting the prey. Like, they've got prey and it's not dead and they haven't secured it. So I think they're sort of making sure that the other Cooper's hawks and the eagles and the red-tailed hawks in the area don't want to swoop down and grab it. I've recently been working with some red-tailed hawks, and I've seen them do that a few times. Once it's dead, they seem to relax. The one red-tailed hawk killed this thing about 10 feet away from me, 3 meters. And as soon as it was dead, it then started to play with it and toss it up and down, and then it flew away and ate it. I think it's really to hide, their prey from somebody else that might want to steal it. And also, when you're on the ground, when they do that, like owls will do this, and I suppose hawks will do it too. They put their wings out like this to make themselves look bigger. So if there's a fox trotting along and it sees the Cooper's hawk on the ground, this is a big bird. This is not a big bird. So there are probably multiple reasons why they do it. But it's, I would think, mostly to intimidate and to hide. Because as soon as the prey is dead, from my observations on hawks and eagles, they fly off with it, or they don't worry about it because they know they can take it.
Awesome, thank you.
These are really tough questions, folks.
They are,
I'm just sitting here having fun. You're picking on me, but good questions. I appreciate them.
Our viewers always ask the hardest questions, but it's awesome. It's teaching us new things too.
We're not playing Stump the Chump here, folks. You're being honest to me.
We have just a couple more questions here, Dave. Ian has asked, has there been any systematic yearly surveying for nest locations and records of Cooper nest activity in Riverwood? Early in the spring, nest areas can be reliably located with the proper technique.
I would like to say yes, but I do not believe it's actually happened. I think one of the areas where citizen science can make a real difference in Riverwood is in doing that very thing. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we have a policy that we do not let people know where nesting birds are. Now, when we had Luke Fazio and Dan Salisbury leading the walks, they would often come across nests, and of course they would point them out. But there is a real concern about bringing a lot of people in and harassing a hawk or whatever on the nest. I do not believe, however, that the birding fraternity that come to Riverwood are actively marking the nests of Cooper's hawks, or in fact, I don't know that anybody has ever found the great horned owl nest on their property, though I'm sure there's at least one. And part of that is because there are parts of the property we do not encourage people to go to. And I think that's healthy. We ask you to stay on the trails. I think that's a real problem. Going off trails, birding is a big problem. So is off-trail fishing, because they destroy the habitat, and that does more damage. So we try to discourage it. If we did do it, I think it should be done by somebody who's working on their PhD, their doctorate, or an undergrad study. And it should be done through the auspices of Derek, our conservation specialist, and he should know what you're doing. We do regular bird counts, but that's different. That's not invading, going off trails. So the answer is, as far as I know, no, we don't. Occasionally we have found that there are universities doing studies on Riverwood that we did not know about. But that hasn't happened, I don't think, for a few years now. So
Okay, and
another
then,
good question.
yeah, I think the final questions that are coming from Farnaz on Facebook and also Linda in Zoom. And I'm going to kind of combine these questions, but what are the sleeping and eating patterns of these specific birds, and what is the largest thing a Cooper's hawk can eat?
I would think something squirrel size would be the maximum. Again, I would suggest that you take a look at some of the literature. It's changing. People are finding different species. But, you know, when you find a large, particularly unusual large animal, it's going to make the news. I wouldn't think that it would be a regular part of their prey. They are songbird feeders. That's their main prey. They may take a squirrel, they may take a cottontail rabbit, which I think would be outside their capabilities, but you know, maybe a sick rabbit. Remember, whatever they get, they've got to fly away with. So I would say, you know, pigeon would be a good size. I've seen one take a duck, which is pretty good. That was down at Port Credit in the winter, but I don't know that the duck was healthy. It might have been a duck that had been injured. Somebody was telling me just the other day about a snowy owl taking a merganser. The merganser apparently had been injured because nobody had seen it fly for 3 or 4 days. The snowy owl swooped down and grabbed it, but it couldn't lift it out of the water. So this fellow was showing me the pictures where it's got the merganser in one claw and is flapping its wings over to the rocks and then climbing out one claw and then dragging the bird with it. So a Cooper's hawk's going to have to fly away with its prey unless it's comfortable eating it. And sometimes they would be. I mean, I've constantly, not constantly, but frequently will find the remains of the feathers from a bird that the Cooper's hawk is plucked on the ground before it ate it. If it's comfortable sitting there, that's fine. But I would think songbirds would be just about big enough for one of these birds. So I don't want to say that they'll take cattle, which I think is what people would like me to say, but I don't think they take cattle or dogs or cats. And I think rabbits would be pushing it. Baby rabbit, maybe, but
It'd be a little alarming if they could take a cat.
We got time for one more.
One more question?
Sure.
I'm just gonna look over here. Dave, did you write any books on birds? I need new reading material. That's a good question. There you go.
No, I have not. I have not written any books on birds per se. I've certainly included birds in a lot of the books I have written because I find them fascinating. I became a bird photographer by accident. I was on safari, I guess, and was a quiet day, and I started photographing birds. That would be like 30, 40 years ago, and I got hooked. But no, I've written articles on eagles and various hawks and ducks and geese for Ontario Outdoors and Seasons magazine and places like that. But no, never written a book about birds. Something I might consider doing.
There you go.
Predators of North America has lots of birds in it, though. So it's out of print now, but if you can find it, it will have things with owls and hawks and eagles.
Awesome.
Oh, an osprey.
And just in the chat there, Ian has given us some more clarification on the difference between Cooper's hawks and Sharpshin hawks. And he actually said the rounded appearance of the tail in Cooper's is due to the length of the tail feathers. So the Sharpshin hawks have almost even length tail feathers that make it visible underside the tail that they have a straight edge tail.
That guy's a birder.
That's what you call a birder there.
Yeah, that's a serious birder. Just one quick word before we go. If you can support the Riverwood Conservancy by picking up a copy of the Blackberry book up to the 30th of this month, those proceeds will go to help our education program, and it would be much appreciated. We are facing challenges, as Stephanie has said, during these times of COVID. It's not money that's going into my pocket. So this is a plea for TRC, the Conservancy, not for my own personal, although, hey, you know.
We appreciate it, Dave. And it's such a cool book already. I got an early copy and it's super exciting. It's a really neat book. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Dave, once again for another great presentation. And we want to thank Credit Valley Conservation one more time for supporting all of our programs. I hope everyone has a great week ahead. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me and I can get in contact with Dave for you as well. And thanks for joining, everyone.
And don't forget to join me next month for a look at wolves. Yes, all of our May programs should be going up sometime early this week. So keep an eye on the events page. We have a lot of events coming up for May. So sign up as many as you want. They're all free. Thank you all for watching. Thanks for your advice on identifying Cooper's hawks. I appreciate that. A learning experience for all of us. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you.